Get away from that table, Valerie. Women who arrange flower pots use the service entrance. Renee Morgan said it into the brief silence between a string quartet and the first champagne toast, loud enough for nearly 200 guests to hear. She was sitting in the chair marked with my name at the Caldwell Urban Holdings merger gala, one manicured hand resting beside my place card as if it were a trophy she had won. The ballroom at the Sonoran Grand in Scottsdale was filled with bankers, developers, city officials, journalists, and the family I had married into 7 years earlier. Every face seemed to turn toward me at once. My husband, Ethan Caldwell, stood behind Renee with his hand on the back of her chair. He did not correct her. He did not ask her to move. He gave me the polished little smile he used whenever he wanted to hurt me without looking cruel. "Don't make tonight difficult," he said. "Renee organized the event. There's room near the floral staff. You'll be more comfortable with your own people." A few guests laughed because his mother did. Margaret Caldwell's laugh was dry and delighted, the sound of a match striking. She had spent most of my marriage referring to my work as my gardening hobby. Ethan had let her because the lie made him look taller. I looked past them at the ballroom's interior courtyard. Blue agaves curved around pale limestone benches. Young desert willow softened the glass walls. A living installation of native vines rose behind a reflecting pool fed by reclaimed water. My company, Northroot Living Design, had created every inch of it 14 months earlier. My name was carved into a small bronze plaque less than 20 feet from where my husband was pretending I belonged with. The hired decorators. Ethan had never visited my studio unless he wanted a photographer to catch him beside one of my projects. He did not know why I left before sunrise for job sites, why I reviewed grading plans at midnight, or why 52 people received paychecks with my signature. When I said I was bidding on a public greenway, he called it the river shrub thing. I had mistaken his lack of curiosity for freedom. I had told myself love did not require an audit. Renee lifted a small planter from the centerpiece. With a glance at Ethan, she tipped it just enough for dark soil to spill across the front of my deep green dress. "Since you're here," she said, placing a cocktail napkin in my hand, "you can clean that up. We don't want dirt ruining the Man of the Year photos." Margaret laughed again. Renee knows how to put everyone in the right place. Heat climbed from my chest to my face. I waited for Ethan to say that was enough. Instead, he rested his palm against the bare skin between Renee's shoulder blades. "Leave it," he said. "My wife has hands for that kind of thing." Several phones tilted in our direction. The Humiliation already had an audience, and by morning it would probably have background music and captions. I did not cry. I set the napkin across the rim of Renee's champagne glass, brushed the soil from my dress with 2 fingers, and looked at my husband. "Did you give her my seat because she has better hands?" His jaw tightened. "Do not make the most important night of my career about your jealousy." The master of ceremonies called Ethan to the stage. He walked up with Renee, not me. Under white lights, he announced that Caldwell Urban Holdings would merge with Red Mesa Residential, creating one of the largest privately held development groups in Arizona. He thanked his brilliant director of strategy for understanding the sacrifices required to stand beside an ambitious man. Renee adjusted his tie with the familiarity of someone who had done it in private. Margaret applauded first and loudest. I had reached the ballroom doors when I saw Arthur Caldwell sitting alone beside the living wall. My father-in-law had once carried 50-pound bags of soil through his nursery, without asking for help. That night his charcoal jacket hung loosely from his shoulders, and his fingers shook around a glass of water. He lifted one hand toward me with an urgency that stopped me. "Valerie," he whispered. "Come here." I crouched beside his chair. "Are you feeling sick?" He looked toward the stage. Fear tightened the skin around his eyes. "Don't sign anything Ethan gives you. He said the papers would protect the nursery. Now Margaret says my house isn't mine anymore." "What papers?" Before he could answer, Margaret appeared behind us. Her fingers closed around his shoulder hard enough to wrinkle his jacket. "Arthur gets confused when he's tired," she said. "Don't fill his head with your plant drama. He asked me for help. He needs rest, not attention." She signaled a driver. Arthur tried to stand, and a folded envelope slipped from inside his jacket. It landed near the base of a planter. I covered it with the toe of my shoe, waited until Margaret turned to scold the driver, then picked it up and slid it into my purse. I locked myself inside the nearest restroom stall before opening it. The envelope contained a copy of the deed to Arthur's 11-acre nursery and his home in Cave Creek. Both had been pledged as collateral to a company called Emerald Horizon Capital. The managing member was Renee Morgan. Behind the deed was a guarantee agreement tying the debt to future revenue from Northroot. The document claimed I had authorized Ethan to pledge my firm's largest municipal contract, the Rio Salado Resilience Corridor, as security. My signature appeared on the final page. It was a good imitation, but whoever copied it had missed the hard downward stroke in the V that I had used since high school. The notary appointment was set for 9 o'clock the next morning. My phone vibrated. Ethan had sent a message. Come back inside and smile. Tomorrow you will confirm the signature. If you embarrass me, everyone will hear how you manipulated my father while he was confused. I read it twice. My hand stopped shaking, not because I felt calm, but because fear had condensed into something colder. When I raised my eyes to the mirror, a white square moved. Beneath the restroom door. Someone outside had slid in a folded note. I opened the door, but the hallway was empty. The note contained 2 sentences. Do not trust Renee or your husband. I recorded them, forcing Arthur to put his thumb on the papers. I tucked the evidence inside my purse and left through the hotel garage without saying goodbye. I did not return to the house Ethan and I shared in Paradise Valley. I drove west to Northroot's studio near the river, where rows of native grasses moved behind the glass walls whenever the air system started. At 12:41 a.m., a light still burned above the finance office. Lucy Chen opened the door wearing running shoes, black leggings, and the expression of a woman who could identify a fraudulent invoice from across a room. We had met in our first landscape construction class at Arizona State University. She had helped me build Northroot from 2 borrowed desks and a pickup truck into a firm with projects across 3 states. She looked at the dirt on my dress. Tell me that is potting soil and not blood. My husband's mistress poured it on me in front of 200 people. Lucy's expression did not change. All right. Then I found out he forged my signature and used his father's nursery to secure a private debt. That is less all right. She locked the door behind me, brewed coffee, and scanned every page. While the files uploaded to our secure drive, I told her about the table, the speech, Arthur's warning, and Ethan's message. She listened without interrupting. Lucy never wasted outrage before she knew where to aim it. Within 15 minutes, she found Emerald Horizon in our correspondence archive. A law firm in Phoenix had contacted Northroot 2 months earlier, asking us to verify the Rio Salado contract as a potential revenue guarantee. The email claimed the inquiry had been authorized by my spouse. I rejected it, Lucy said. You never sent board approval, and our operating agreement requires 2 signatures for any pledge above $250,000. Why didn't you tell me? I did. I forwarded it the morning you were in the hospital with your aunt. Ethan answered from your personal account and said the inquiry was a routine insurance review. She turned her monitor toward me. There it was, an email from my account that I had never written. Its punctuation was too formal. Its closing used best instead of the thank you I had used for years. Ethan knew my password because I had once believed spouses should not hide doors from each other. He doesn't know the corridor contract cannot legally be assigned, I said. The city selected Northroot based on our qualifications. The value disappears if control changes. He also doesn't know I preserved the entire header trail. Lucy tapped the screen. This came from the IP address at Caldwell headquarters. We changed every password, froze all outgoing transfers above $10,000, notified our outside counsel, and created 3 encrypted copies of the documents. At 2:15 a.m., the building intercom rang. The security camera showed a short woman in Navy caregiver scrubs holding an unopened bag of sweetbread and an old phone against her chest. I recognized Celia Martinez. She assisted Arthur 4 afternoons a week after his minor stroke. Lucy met her at the lobby while I stayed behind the locked conference room door. When Celia entered, her eyes went first to the soil on my dress and then to the copied deed on the table. I left the note, she said. Mr. Caldwell told me you would believe him. Where is he now? At home. Mrs. Caldwell gave him a sleeping pill. He pretended to take it and hid it under his tongue. Is he confused? Celia set down the bread. Sometimes he loses a word. Sometimes he needs extra time. That does not mean he cannot understand his own property. He gets frightened because his wife and son keep telling people he is incompetent. She unlocked the old phone. 3 weeks ago, he asked me to leave this recording in the room during a meeting. He said if anything happened, I should take it to you. The audio began with the sound of a drawer closing. Margaret spoke first. Arthur, press your thumb here. Ethan knows how to protect the family assets. Arthur's voice sounded tired but clear. That page says collateral. I already told you the nursery belongs in trust for the grandchildren. The house is not to be touched. Ethan answered. If you refuse to cooperate, we will tell the court. You no longer understand anything. We can have a conservator sign it anyway. You cannot take my name and call it permission. A chair scraped. Renee said, Ethan, he is upset. We should stop. Margaret's voice sharpened. Hold his wrist still. Then Ethan said the sentence that ended the last soft feeling I had for him. Renee needs Emerald Horizon active before the merger. Once Valerie confirms her guarantee, Dad can complain to whoever still. answers his calls. There was a struggle, Arthur breathing hard, and Margaret saying, "Do it for your family." A dull tap followed. Arthur's thumb had met an ink pad or the paper. The recording ended with him asking Celia, somewhere beyond the room, to bring him water. I covered my mouth. Margaret had not merely ignored her son's theft. She had held her husband in place while he was stripped of the land he had spent 40 years building. Celia swiped to a folder of photographs. Arthur had found bank statements hidden in the locked drawer of his own desk. Over 10 months, $3,800,000 had moved from Caldwell family accounts into Emerald Horizon. The company had paid for hotel suites, jewelry, private travel, and the lease on a furnished condo in Renee's name. "Mr. Caldwell thinks they will put him in a memory facility if he speaks," Celia said. "Mrs. Caldwell toured one last week. She left the brochure where he could see it." "Why did he wait until tonight?" Lucy asked. "He was trying to get the original trust papers. He did not want his grandchildren to lose everything because of his fear." The shape of Ethan's plan became visible. He had not forged my signature merely to rescue an over-leveraged merger. He had drained his father's assets to finance an affair and maintain the image of a successful heir. Northroot was the last clean revenue stream within reach. If I ratified the guarantee, he could refinance the hidden debt. If the scheme failed later, he intended to accuse me of manipulating Arthur and blame Renee for managing Emerald Horizon. I stared through the studio glass at the demonstration garden I had planted 6 years earlier. Moonlight silvered the tips of the desert grasses. Ethan used to tell people he had given me room to start Northroot, as if my company had grown in a corner of his estate. In truth, I had built it with a $30,000 competition grant, Lucy's savings, and 18 months without a salary. Ethan had refused to invest because landscaping, in his words, did not scale. "What happens at 9 o'clock? Celia asked. "I do not sign," I said. Lucy leaned against the table. "That protects Northroot. It does not protect Arthur from whatever they do next." My phone lit up with a message from Renee. "He did not marry you for love. He needed a wife with assets. I can prove it, but I want protection." I showed it to Lucy and Celia. "Could be a trap," Lucy said. "Probably." I typed a reply. "But traps tell you what the person setting them needs." I asked Renee to meet me after sunrise at Arthur's nursery in Cave Creek. I chose a place Ethan could not enter without being noticed and where Arthur had taught me, years earlier, how to tell whether a lemon tree was thirsty by the curl of its youngest leaves. Renee arrived at 6:50 wearing jeans, a cream blouse, and oversized sunglasses. Without the red gown and ballroom lights, she looked younger than I had expected and much more tired. She stopped between 2 rows of citrus trees when she saw Lucy beside me. "You brought your accountant." "My chief financial officer," I said. "You remember the job titles of women you respect." She removed her sunglasses. The skin beneath her eyes was gray. "I deserved that. You poured soil on me and called me staff in a building my company designed." "I know. You sat in my chair. Ethan told me to. I did it because I wanted everyone to see me beside him." Her chin trembled once, then steadied. "There is no excuse." "Then do not offer one. Show me what you have." She opened a clear plastic folder. Inside were printed screenshots of messages between her and Ethan. In one, he called me a dormant guarantee. In another, he promised Renee the condo once I ratified the debt. A third read, "After confirmation, Renee remains responsible for Emerald. Valerie loses Northroot if she talks. Mom will say Dad approved everything." Lucy photographed each page with a forensic capture app that recorded time and location. "Why would he write that to you?" I asked. "He didn't. I found the draft on his tablet last night while he was on stage. It was a note to himself, a list of what to tell the attorneys after closing." "So you discovered you were not the future Mrs. Caldwell. You were the designated criminal." Renee flinched. "He told me Arthur approved the company. He said you were a freelance garden designer drowning in debt. I signed filings because Ethan said the lawyers had cleared them. I knew the affair was wrong. I knew humiliating you was wrong. I did not know the money came from Arthur. You were director of strategy. Not knowing what funded your strategy is not innocence. I am not asking you to call me innocent. I am asking you to keep him from burying me alone." The honesty of that answer was uglier and more useful than an apology. Lucy held up one screenshot. "Will you authenticate these in front of the investors?" Renee swallowed. "Tonight they present the flagship project at the Water Court. The merger committee, senior lenders, and outside investors will all be there." Ethan moved the closing announcement forward because he expects Valerie's signature in the morning. The Water Court was another place I had designed, a desert garden woven through the headquarters of Red Mesa Residential. Ethan planned to use my work as the backdrop for proof that Caldwell Urban Holdings was stable. He had built his final performance on ground that belonged, creatively and contractually, to me. I called Celia. Ask Arthur one question. Does he want us to protect him quietly, or does he want to speak where they cannot rewrite him? There was a pause. Then Arthur's voice came through the speaker, unsteady but deliberate. Bring me there, daughter. I want my name back before they take the rest of it. At 8:32, Ethan called for the first time. I let it ring. At 8:35, he sent a photo of the private notary room with a pen laid across the guarantee. At 8:41, he wrote, "You have 19 minutes to stop acting emotional." At 8:44, my attorney sent formal notices disputing the signature, freezing any reliance on Northroot revenue, and demanding preservation of every Caldwell server, phone, and transaction related to Emerald Horizon. At 8:47, the notary canceled the appointment. At 8:49, Ethan called 6 times in a row. I turned off the phone, went home only after confirming he had left, and packed 2 suitcases. In the closet, half of his clothes were missing. The empty hangers told me his affair had already become another household. I left my wedding ring on the kitchen counter beside a single grain of soil I found in the seam of my dress. Then I changed into an ivory suit, tied my dark hair back, and placed a small handful of that soil in a paper envelope. Renee had thrown it at me as proof that my work was beneath her. By nightfall, I intended to return it to Ethan as evidence of the life he had never bothered to understand. My attorney, Denise Holloway, met us at Northroot at 10:30. She had represented the firm since its first commercial contract and had once described lawsuits as storms, dangerous mainly when people ignored the pressure changes. She listened to the audio through headphones, studied the deed, and asked Celia to repeat exactly how the recording had been made. Arizona permits a person who is present to record a conversation, Denise said. Arthur asked Celia to leave the phone running in his own study, and he was in the conversation. We will preserve the original and let investigators decide admissibility. The important thing right now is safety. She called an elder law attorney named Marcus Reed, who had represented Arthur years earlier. Marcus answered on the second ring, then went silent when Denise mentioned the nursery trust. Arthur came to me 6 months ago, he said. He was worried Ethan was pressing him to borrow against the land. We prepared a restatement of his trust, but Arthur never returned to sign it. Margaret told my office he had changed his mind. Did you ever speak to Arthur directly? I asked. No. She canceled the appointment from his phone. That was when Celia remembered the key. Arthur wore a thin silver chain beneath his shirt. Margaret assumed it held a religious medal, but Celia had seen a small flat key beside the medal while helping him change after physical therapy. Arthur had told her it opened the box that proves I remembered. We drove back to the nursery in 2 cars. Celia entered through the side gate while Denise waited across the road. Lucy and I stayed in the propagation greenhouse where employees moved trays of seedlings beneath white shade cloth. No one looked twice at me. Arthur had introduced me as family long before Ethan decided I was staff. Celia found him on the back porch with the silver chain in his hand. Margaret had gone to a luncheon, leaving a driver in the front room. Arthur walked slowly through the greenhouse with Celia beside him, refusing the wheelchair because, as he said, I want my legs to remember whose land this is. The key opened a weatherproof metal box hidden beneath the potting bench where he had taught his grandchildren to start seeds. Inside were copies of the original nursery trust, a handwritten ledger, 3 sealed envelopes, and an external drive wrapped in waxed cloth. The ledger documented every request Ethan had made for money over 2 years. At first the amounts were small, $25,000 for an urgent tax payment, $40,000 for a deposit connected to a development option. Then they grew. Arthur had written questions in the margins. No closing statement? Why pay DH? Margaret says do not call auditor. The external drive held security camera clips from the nursery office. Arthur had installed the camera after inventory began disappearing. One clip showed Ethan unlocking the desk at night. Another showed Margaret taking bank statements and placing them in her purse. The final clip showed Renee arriving with a stack of papers while Ethan disconnected the office printer from the network. Arthur lowered himself onto a bench. I knew enough to be afraid, but every time I asked a question, Margaret said the stroke had made me suspicious. Ethan would finish my sentences wrong and then tell people I had forgotten what I meant. You documented it, I said. Because you taught me that roots leave evidence. He gave me a tired smile. When one tree in a row fails, you do not blame the leaves. You test the soil, the water, the line beneath it. One sealed envelope was addressed to Marcus Reed. Another was addressed to the board of Caldwell Urban Holdings. The third had my name on it. Inside mine was a letter dated 5 months earlier. Valerie, if you are reading this, I waited too long. Ethan believes your company is small because you do not brag. He asked me how much of Northroot he would receive if you died or divorced. I told him that question should shame him. He laughed and said marriage was a balance sheet. I should have warned you that day. My vision blurred. I had prepared myself for proof that Ethan wanted my assets now. I had not prepared for proof that he had evaluated me as an acquisition before our marriage was even over. Arthur touched my wrist. I am sorry. You are not the person who made those vows. I let him keep lying. Then help me stop him. Marcus arrived 30 minutes later with a mobile notary and a geriatric psychiatrist Denise had contacted through an emergency elder abuse network. The psychiatrist spent almost an hour with Arthur alone. She asked him about the date, his property, his medications, his family, the merger, the documents, and the consequences of signing. Arthur needed time to retrieve some names, but he understood every decision. Her preliminary assessment found him capable of directing counsel and managing the property decisions at issue. The result should have given us room to breathe. Instead, Margaret's black SUV swept into the nursery lot just before noon. She entered the greenhouse with Ethan's corporate attorney and 2 private security guards. Her pearls were perfectly centered. Rage made the rest of her face look carved. Arthur, come home, she said. Valerie is exploiting your condition exactly as Ethan warned us. Arthur remained seated at the potting bench. This is my home. The corporate attorney handed Denise a petition seeking temporary emergency control over Arthur's financial decisions. It alleged that I had isolated him, manipulated him into challenging valid transactions, and encouraged a caregiver to steal confidential documents. Ethan had filed it at 10:02, less than 90 minutes. After the notary cancelled. For one sick moment, I understood how completely he had prepared the accusation. The dirt at the gala, the jokes about my work, the constant public story that I was a struggling landscaper, none of it had been casual contempt. It created a version of me he could later describe as resentful, financially desperate, and hungry for Caldwell property. Margaret looked at my ivory suit and smiled. You change costumes quickly. You change your husband's capacity whenever it benefits you. One guard stepped toward Arthur. Denise moved between them. Dr. Shaw has just evaluated Mr. Caldwell, who is represented by independent counsel, she said. Any attempt to remove him against his will be documented. The attorney's confidence slipped. He had not expected a doctor or Marcus. This woman has interfered with a vulnerable adult. Margaret insisted. Arthur opened the metal box and placed his ledger on the bench. This woman is the only person in your family who asked what I wanted. Margaret stared at the ledger. Her face changed so subtly that I might have missed it if I had not spent years presenting designs to skeptical boards. The anger remained, but fear moved behind it. She knew what those pages contained. You always were sentimental, she told him. That is why Ethan had to become strong. No, Arthur said. That is why he became hungry. The guards did not touch him. The corporate attorney asked for a private conversation with Margaret. She refused, spun toward me, and lowered her voice. You think public embarrassment will save you? If the merger fails, hundreds of people lose jobs. Investors lose pensions. Arthur's grandchildren lose their inheritance. All because your pride was injured at a dinner table. The merger was already built on stolen money. Every family fortune has an ugly room. Intelligent wives close the door. Intelligent husbands do not forge the key. She left with the security guards. As the SUV pulled away, Lucy looked at the petition. They were ready to call you a predator before you knew there was a crime. Then tonight cannot be only a confrontation, I said. It has to be a record they cannot edit. We divided the work. Denise and Marcus contacted the Adult Protective Services Unit and the County Attorney's Financial Crimes Desk. Lucy prepared a clean timeline linking the email from Caldwell headquarters, the forged guarantee, the Emerald Horizon transfers, and the attempted notary confirmation. Celia preserved the original phone and wrote a statement in her own words. Renee agreed to bring Ethan's tablet and the corporate access logs she could lawfully provide. Arthur signed instructions appointing Marcus as his independent counsel and revoking every financial authorization held by Ethan or Margaret. He did not transfer money to me, give me control of the nursery, or make any dramatic last-minute gift. That mattered. We were not constructing a competing scheme. We were taking his decisions out of the hands of people who had spent months speaking over him. At 2:20, Lucy discovered another problem. Northridge Bank had received a copy of the guarantee that morning. Although we had disputed it before any transfer, the bank's automated risk system had placed a temporary hold on our construction line of credit. Payroll was due the next day. We can cover salaries from reserves, she said, but 3 active contractors draw from that line. If the hold lasts a week, work stops on the corridor. I closed my eyes. Ethan had always treated my company as a number on a private spreadsheet. He had never pictured our irrigation supervisor whose wife was expecting a baby, the young designer paying off student loans, or the maintenance crews who clocked in while the desert was still dark. His forged signature was already reaching into 52 homes. Use my personal reserve, I said. That is almost everything liquid you have. Use it. Lucy hesitated. He may have expected that. Drain your cash, freeze the company, then offer to make the problem disappear if you sign. Which is why we keep every employee working and make him face people who know the difference between his money and mine. I called our senior staff into the studio and told them the truth without details that could compromise the case. I said a fraudulent document had triggered a bank review, that payroll was secure, and that no one needed to defend me online or speak to reporters. A video of the gala had already appeared on social media. In the clip, Renee tipped the soil, Margaret laughed, and Ethan told me my hands were made for it. The comments were divided between outrage and people who assumed the scene was staged. A local business account had captioned it, "Developer puts landscaper wife in her place." Mateo Alvarez, our field operations manager, watched the clip once and locked his phone. "My crew built that courtyard," he said. "You spent 6 nights fixing drainage because Caldwell's contractor ignored the grading plan." "Do not fight in the comments," I told him. I was thinking about sending them the change orders. Not yet. The staff returned to work. But they did it with the focused anger of people who had realized the insult was aimed at all of them. By 4 o'clock, our council had a statement from the city confirming that the Rio Salado contract was non-assignable and had never been approved as security. The landscape architects who held Northroot's professional licenses signed a declaration that Ethan had no operational authority. Our insurer preserved the attempted claim. Every quiet fact closed another door. Renee arrived at 4:30 carrying the tablet in a padded case. She looked at the employees moving through the studio and seemed to understand for the first time that Northroot was not an abstract asset. "He told me there were 8 of you," she said. He stopped counting when the truth made him smaller. She placed the tablet on the conference table. Its message history showed that the affair had begun 18 months earlier, shortly after Caldwell Urban Holdings failed to secure a loan for a luxury tower in Tempe. Ethan promised Renee that the merger would cover the shortfall. Renee introduced Emerald Horizon as a vehicle for temporary bridge capital. Arthur's money became the bridge. Then we found a thread Renee had never seen. Ethan had accidentally synchronized messages from a second corporate account. In those messages, he and Margaret discussed ending the affair publicly after the merger. Margaret called Renee useful but unsuitable. Ethan replied that Renee would accept responsibility once prosecutors showed her the formation documents. Renee read the exchange without speaking. Her mouth tightened until the color left her lips. "Your mother-in-law picked the red dress," she finally said. "She told me I should look like the future of the company. She wanted every camera to remember you. As the woman beside him. As the woman whose name was on Emerald Horizon." That was the first reversal Ethan had not planned for. His mistress understood that the spectacle designed to crown her had also been designed to identify her as the villain. She sat down slowly. "I thought Margaret accepted me." "Margaret accepts tools." Renee looked at the soil still trapped in a seam of my dress, which hung in a garment bag near the conference room. "What do you need me to do?" "Tell the truth when it costs you something." At 5:10, an executive from Red Mesa called me directly. Evelyn Price chaired the merger review committee and had previously interviewed Northroot for a sustainability consulting role. She had seen the gala video and received a copy of our legal notice because the forged guarantee appeared in the merger's disclosure package. "Ethan says this is a marital dispute," she said. "He claims you are withdrawing a valid guarantee to punish him for a personal relationship. Ask him why the guarantee was sent from Caldwell headquarters, why my board never approved it, and why a company managed by his director of strategy received $3,800,000 from his father." There was a pause. "Can you support that?" "Yes. The lenders are meeting at 7 o'clock in the water court. We planned a public presentation at 7:30. If what you have is real, bring counsel. I am also bringing Arthur Caldwell. Ethan told us Arthur cannot make informed decisions." Arthur leaned toward the speaker. "Evelyn, I beat you at chess 4 months ago. You blamed the sun in your eyes, though we were indoors." Evelyn exhaled. "Hello, Arthur. You may decide whether I am confused after hearing me, not after hearing my son. Come at 6:45. Use the east entrance." After the call, Arthur sat very still. The effort of the day had drained him. I asked if he was sure. "I am afraid," he said. "But fear has been making my decisions for months. It has poor judgment." Celia helped him into a clean navy jacket. Marcus carried the metal box. Denise carried the copied financial file. Lucy carried the presentation drive. Renee carried Ethan's tablet and, for once, nothing that made her look important. I carried the paper envelope of soil. As we drove toward the water court, a dust storm warning appeared on the highway signs. A brown wall was forming far south of the city, but above Scottsdale the evening remained painfully clear. I watched the mountains sharpen against the sky and thought about the public parks I had designed. Every plan began with pressure, water pressure, heat pressure, foot traffic, money, politics. Good systems did not pretend pressure was absent. They gave it somewhere honest to go. For 7 years, I had absorbed Ethan's pressure and called it peace. That night, I intended to redirect it. The water court looked like an expensive dream at dusk. Pale stone paths crossed shallow channels of recycled water. Desert willows framed a scale model of 4 residential towers, and low lights shimmered beneath the branches of young Palo Verde trees. I had designed the place to give people a sense of breath between glass and concrete. Ethan was using it to convince investors that his name still meant stability. We entered while Margaret posed with Renee's empty place beside a banner for the merger. Ethan stood near the model speaking to 3 lenders. When he saw me, relief crossed his face before he noticed Arthur, Celia, and the attorneys behind me. The relief collapsed. He set down his glass and approached with a smile that never reached his eyes. "You finally came to your senses," he said. "There is a private room upstairs. I would rather sign where you humiliated me." His gaze moved to Lucy's laptop bag, then to the metal box Marcus carried. "Who gave you permission to bring my father?" Arthur gripped his cane and straightened. "I do not need permission to speak about what is mine." Several guests turned. Margaret crossed the courtyard fast enough to send one heel skidding on the stone. "Arthur is exhausted," she said. "Celia, take him home." Celia stayed behind his chair. "He asked to be here. You are an employee. I am also a witness." The last word reached the nearest reporters. Phones came up. Ethan's smile vanished. Evelyn Price stepped away from the merger committee. "We will move the lender meeting into the courtyard," she announced. "Counsel has requested that any discussion of the guarantee occur on the record." Ethan turned to her. "This is a private marital conflict. A marital conflict does not usually appear in a merger disclosure schedule as $18 million in pledged revenue." That number startled even me. The forged guarantee listed future contract income, but Ethan had valued it at more than 3 times the amount Northroot could reasonably earn. Lucy opened her laptop. "He counted the same revenue twice," she whispered. "Once as collateral and once as projected Caldwell consulting income." Ethan heard her. "You have no right to review confidential schedules." "You put my company in them," I said. "That gave me the right." Evelyn invited me to the microphone intended for the flagship presentation. My reflection appeared in the glass wall behind the stage, ivory suit, dark hair pulled tight, no wedding ring. For a moment I saw the woman at the gala restroom mirror, dirt on her dress and a forged signature in her hand. She had thought the worst discovery was that her husband wanted to steal her work. She had not yet understood that he had spent years teaching everyone to underestimate her so they would believe him when he did. "My name is Valerie Sandoval," I said. "I am the founder and chief executive of Northroot Living Design, the firm that designed this court, the Sonoran Grand Courtyard, and the Rio Salado Resilience Corridor that Ethan Caldwell attempted to pledge without authorization." A man near the scale model walked to the design plaque and read it. He looked from my name to Ethan. "You told us your wife did residential garden work," he said. "She is angry about an affair," Ethan replied. "Her signature is valid. She agreed to help the family and changed her mind after a personal disagreement." Denise handed the committee our operating agreement, the city's non-assignment letter, and the forensic email header. Lucy projected them onto the screen reserved for architectural renderings. The header showed the false authorization leaving Caldwell headquarters. The board records showed no approval. The bank notice showed my immediate dispute. Then Lucy placed my authentic signature beside the copied one. Even at a distance, the broken stroke in the forged V was obvious. "A handwriting issue can be examined later," Ethan said. "Nothing here affects the merger tonight." "It affects Arthur Caldwell now," Marcus answered. He projected the Emerald Horizon deed and the flow of $3,800,000 from Arthur's accounts. Hotel suites, jewelry, airfare, and Renee's condo appeared in a clean sequence. The guests stopped looking at the tower model. They photographed the money trail instead. Margaret moved toward the laptop. "Turn this off. This is a family humiliation." Arthur's voice reached the microphone before she did. "The humiliation was letting my own son call me incompetent while he robbed me." Celia played the recording. Margaret's instruction to press Arthur's thumb filled the courtyard. Ethan's threat about a conservator echoed from the glass. Renee's hesitation, the scrape of the chair, and Arthur's refusal were painfully clear. When Margaret's recorded voice ordered someone to hold his wrist, the real Margaret sat down as if her knees had failed. Ethan stepped toward the audio console. A Red Mesa security officer blocked him. "That recording was illegally obtained," Ethan said. "That determination belongs to investigators," Denise replied. "Not to the man speaking on it." Ethan searched the crowd for Renee. She formed Emerald Horizon. She made the transfers. She is the person you should be questioning. Renee walked out from behind one of the desert willows. She had changed into a plain navy dress. Without champagne or Ethan's hand at her back, she looked like someone arriving to testify rather than celebrate. "That was your plan," she said. She gave the tablet to Evelyn and authenticated the messages. The screen showed Ethan calling me a dormant guarantee, promising to leave me once Northroot secured the debt, and planning to identify Renee as the sole decision-maker if the accounts were reviewed. Then the second account appeared. Margaret's words, useful but unsuitable, glowed above the scale model. Renee looked directly at Margaret, not at the cameras. "You chose my dress so every photograph would place me beside the company you planned to blame." Margaret's mouth opened, but no sound came. Ethan recovered first. "Renee stole internal communications because I ended the relationship. Valerie promised her protection. They coordinated this." "I promised her nothing," I said. "She will answer for what she signed. So will you." The simple refusal unsettled him more than if I had defended her. His plan depended on women choosing a man or choosing revenge. He had no language for two women who disliked each other and still agreed on the facts. He turned to Arthur. "Dad, tell them you approved the transfers. Tell them you wanted the merger to survive." Arthur opened the metal box. "I wanted the company to survive you." Marcus removed the original Caldwell Voting Trust. Arthur had never transferred the final 38% voting interest to Ethan. The ownership summary supplied to Red Mesa listed Ethan as controlling the company, but the signed trust required Arthur's approval for any merger, sale, or pledge above $5 million. Ethan had submitted an unsigned amendment claiming that authority had passed to him after Arthur's stroke. "The merger was never authorized," Marcus said. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then the chair of Caldwell's independent board asked to see the document. Its signature page carried 2 witness seals and a registration number. The board's counsel checked the number on his phone and went pale. That was the second reversal Ethan had not planned for. He had not merely lied about the quality of his collateral. He had lied about having the power to offer the company at all. Margaret stood again. "Arthur intended to sign the amendment. He forgot." "I remembered enough to hide the original from you," Arthur said. She stared at him as if he had violated an agreement by remaining a person. Ethan grabbed the microphone. "Everyone here benefited from my work. I kept Caldwell alive. I made the deals. I carried a weak family while my wife played with trees and my father counted flower pots. You cannot erase what I built because of technical paperwork." Evelyn closed the merger binder. "Control of the seller is not technical paperwork. Neither are forged guarantees, undisclosed related party transfers, or elder exploitation. Red Mesa is suspending the transaction." One of the senior lenders followed. "Our commitment is withdrawn pending a fraud review." The announcement moved through the courtyard like a pressure wave. Phones rang. Board members stepped away to call counsel. A journalist began speaking live into a camera. The flagship presentation screen still showed the transfer diagram, a red line leading from Arthur's account to the condo Ethan had promised Renee. Ethan looked at me, and fury transformed into need with such speed that I finally saw the mechanism of our marriage. Charm was not the opposite of cruelty. It was the door he used when cruelty stopped working. "Valerie," he said softly. "We can fix this. I will give you whatever percentage you want. Confirm the signature and we can handle the rest. Privately. You cannot give me a percentage of my own work. Think about your employees. The bank has frozen your credit. If Caldwell falls, your contracts will be dragged into litigation for years. My employees know the truth. Truth does not make payroll." "No. I do." I took the paper envelope from my pocket and opened it over the forged guarantee lying on the presentation table. The soil fell in a thin dark line across my copied signature. "Last night, you said my hands were made for dirt," I told him. "These hands built every beautiful place you used to sell your lies." The courtyard went quiet enough for water to be heard moving through the channels. "You thought soil meant I was beneath you. Soil is what holds weight after the facade cracks." 2 investigators from the county attorney's financial crimes unit entered with a specialist from Adult Protective Services. Evelyn had contacted them after receiving our notice. Denise had supplied the supporting records before the meeting. They did not drag Ethan away for the cameras or declare him guilty on the spot. Real consequences were slower and more exact. They identified the devices and financial records subject to preservation, separated Arthur from Margaret for a welfare interview, and served Caldwell's counsel with notice that transfers connected to Emerald Horizon were under review. Ethan asked his mother to do something. Margaret looked past him at the cameras. For the first time, protecting her image required abandoning her son. Arthur did not raise his voice. "Give me back whatever years of peace are left," he said. "Then ask someone else for mercy." He turned away before Ethan could answer. Outside, the dust storm had reached the city. Wind drove grit across the parking lot, and the water court's trees bent without breaking because our team had calculated the root space correctly. Celia covered Arthur's face with a scarf while we helped him into the car. Behind us, lights flickered across the suspended merger banner. "Did I sound confused?" Arthur asked. "You sounded like yourself," I said. He nodded. I had almost forgotten that was allowed. The weeks that followed were not clean or cinematic. They were depositions, forensic audits, emergency board meetings, bank calls, medication reviews, and mornings when I woke reaching for a man I no longer wanted because habit had not received the news. Northroot's credit hold lasted 3 days. My personal reserve covered payroll, but the city released an early approved payment after confirming the forged guarantee had no effect on our contract. Not one employee missed a check. Mateo taped a copy of the city letter beside the coffee machine with a note, "Trees still standing." The Caldwell board placed Ethan on leave and appointed an independent restructuring officer. The merger disappeared from press releases. Emerald Horizon stopped looking like a sleek investment vehicle and became what it had always been, a trail of borrowed prestige, concealed debt, and stolen choices. The investigation found that Margaret had authorized 2 transfers from Arthur's joint account after telling the bank he was physically unable to participate. Her insistence that she had merely trusted Ethan did not survive her own messages or the nursery footage. The petition against Arthur was withdrawn. A judge recognized his independent counsel and ordered temporary safeguards around the contested property while the case proceeded. Renee surrendered the tablet, financial credentials, and company records. She negotiated through her own attorney and left Caldwell before the board could fire her. I did not forgive her. Telling the truth after being chosen as a scapegoat did not erase the night she chose cruelty for applause. But I also refused Ethan's version of justice, in which one woman carried every sin he had designed. Arthur recovered control of the nursery and returned home only after Margaret moved out under an interim agreement. Celia continued helping him, now paid from an account no relative could access. He rehired the nursery manager Ethan had dismissed and spent his mornings inspecting lemon trees with a cane in one hand and his ledger in the other. One afternoon, he apologized while we planted a young tree near the greenhouse. "I knew you were brilliant," he said. "I saw what you built." I stayed quiet whenever Margaret belittled it because silence was easier than conflict. Silence is not neutral when someone uses it as permission. "I know." He pressed soil around the roots. "I am learning late. Late is still time." I filed for divorce the morning after the water court meeting. Ethan challenged everything at first, including property he had once mocked as worthless. Discovery changed his enthusiasm. Every demand created another opportunity to examine his accounts. The only paper I signed for him was the final settlement after my attorneys confirmed Northroot remained entirely mine. The last time he came to the studio, he wore the same perfect white shirt from the gala, but there was no driver waiting and no audience arranged behind him. He stood in reception beneath a framed photograph of the Sonoran Grand Courtyard. "I miss you," he said. I did not understand what I had. I walked out so my receptionist would not have to carry the moment for me. "You understood exactly what I had," I said. "That is why you tried to steal it." Renee manipulated me. My mother pressured me. We were both trapped in expectations. "You forged my name when no one was holding your hand." His face hardened. The familiar contempt returned as soon as sympathy failed. "You think a few parks make you powerful?" "No. I think deciding who enters my building does." I asked security to escort him out. He looked toward the courtyard as if searching for a service entrance. There was one, of course. I did not make him use it. I did not need to borrow his humiliation to prove I had survived mine. 8 months later, Northroot opened Desert Bloom Commons along the Rio Salado. The park included shaded walking paths, flood-resistant gardens, play areas, and a long bioswale planted by crews whose names were listed beside mine. Arthur sat in the front row with Celia. Lucy stood near the stage pretending not to cry. A reporter asked what it meant to build green spaces in a city defined by heat and hard ground. I looked down at my boots. Fresh soil darkened the leather. "It means something people step on can still take root," I said. "It can hold a place together, give shelter, and become impossible to pull out without revealing what was built around it." The applause did not make me more valuable. It confirmed something I had finally learned without needing witnesses. I had never been the small wife Ethan allowed people to mock. I was the woman creating beauty while he collected appearances. My work had looked quiet only to people who confused noise with power. That evening, Arthur sent a lemon tree to the small house I had bought near the studio. A handwritten card hung from one branch. "For everything true that keeps growing." I planted it in the courtyard with my bare hands. The evening air smelled of rain on warm stone, and I listened to the quiet scrape of my trowel until the courtyard felt entirely mine, free of every voice that had once told me where I belonged. Dirt worked beneath my fingernails and settled into the lines of my palms. For the first time since the gala, it did not remind me of Renee's laugh, Margaret's approval, or Ethan's hand on another woman's back. It reminded me that roots do their most important work where arrogant people never think to look. It reminded me that freedom can begin with the very thing someone used to make you feel small.